Stop the cruel business of the traffickers because they put human lives at risk with maximum profit. That is why the federal police are now carrying out additional checks on the smuggling routes at the borders with Poland and the Czech Republic. These additional controls complement the dragnet that we have already intensified in recent months.
OK, well, let's bring in Denis MacShane, who is a former British Member of Parliament and Minister for Europe. Thanks, Denis, for joining us on the programme. So, at the height of the 2015 migration crisis, it was Germany that led the way for EU countries, and they took in over 1 million refugees. So, this is quite a turnaround.
It's an enormous turnaround. 2015 was a disaster. It was Angela Merkel who couldn't appear in Europe without a Hitler moustache painted on her lip because of what she did to Greece, to a lesser extent Ireland. She was one of the most hated politicians because to protect German banks and corrupt German companies, she sent Greek pensioners, Greek workers into poverty for years. OK, and she changed the subject entirely by being Saint Angela, letting the Syrian immigrants come in. But now what's far more important is this is being imposed on the Polish frontier. German-Polish reconciliation has been at the heart of post-war Europe. I think it puts a question mark over Schengen. Poland is accused of selling illegally, improperly, hundreds of thousands of visas to Asian and African immigrants to enter Europe with a Polish visa, and the Germans are so angry about Polish behaviour. There are big elections in Bavaria, the biggest state or land in Germany, in 10 days' time, also in Hesse, the big region around Frankfurt. And the Alternative for Deutschland, the so-called neo-Nazi far-right German party, is squeezing the established parties on this. So this is a panic response, but it's very worrying because it's part of the crisis. We've seen France saying they don't want to let in any immigrants who've arrived in Italy, problems between Spain and across Europe, in England and not in the European Union, but nonetheless a sort of violent, almost language against any refugees and immigrants from the Home Secretary, Ms. Suella Braverman. But the German one is the very heart of Europe, closing frontiers or slowing down frontiers. They're doing it in agreement with the governments in Berlin and Prague, they say, but this is a signal to Poland, whose prime minister keeps attacking the leader of the opposition, Donald Tusk, saying, who is he? And the crowd shout, he is a German, he's a German, he's a German. Well, Mr. Mazowiecki and the right-wing nationalist government in Poland has been increasing the almost racist hate against Germany inside Poland. Europe is going into quite a deep crisis about its own identity.
Well, I also have to say back to you that, Angela Merkel, Mutti, as she was known to by many, was also beloved by many. But let's talk about Schengen then. It is one of Europe's greatest achievements, one of its founding principles. So what does this say about what's going on in the EU then? Does it really need to control its borders to protect Schengen, or do you think this is showing that Schengen is perhaps falling apart?
Well, Schengen was never a founding principle. It came in very, very late, 15, 18 years ago, and it was simply to sensibly allow people to drive across European borders between Germany and France, between Germany and Poland, without every car, lorry, van being stopped, checked for passports and any goods that were inside. It worked well, but the mass arrival, the destruction of the creation of failed states in Iraq and Libya, thanks to Britain and France and Syria, and Britain responsible in Iraq, and created this mass movement. The president of Tunisia actually urging African immigrants into Tunisia to jump on these boats and head for Italy. And as the Miss Faeser, who's actually the Social Democratic chief candidate in Hesse, she was on your program, the Interior Minister, rightly pointed out, there's widespread criminality. I mean, most of these movement of people now is not spontaneous. It's organized by criminal gangs who charge everybody 1, 2, 3, 4,000 euros. It's an enormous European-wide problem. And Germany has highlighted, Germany, which up to now has always been the most European of countries, the most generous, except when it came to Greece, of course, of countries, now is adopting the same language and the same line as, frankly, very right-wing anti-immigrant politicians in Italy, lesser extent in France, in Britain, and closing its frontiers. And even temporarily, when Germany closes its frontiers, that is a question mark over what Europe does next.
So how important then do you think it is that Europe sorts out its refugee policy, or perhaps comes together to find a new policy altogether to stop these divisions on migration and refugee policy?
Well, it does go back. You referred to dear old Mutti, Mr. Putin's best friend in Europe, Angela Merkel, say 8 years ago now, 2015, and she said, I open all my borders to anybody who wants to come in, and everybody did come in, and the rest of it. And then she said to the other European countries, to Poland, to France, to Czechia, to Slovakia, the neighboring countries of Germany, oh, by the way, you have to take your share. And they all said, doesn't matter whether it's a right-wing government or a liberal government or a left-wing government, they said, wait a minute, you never asked us. You never told us this was part of your generous offer, that we would have to take a share. We're much poorer than you. We can't actually take in an awful lot of very poor people who we don't know, where they come from, what they're up to. And that really was in 2015. Yeah, I know we all applauded, I applauded, but actually that was the moment when this whole crisis to some extent began. But look at Donald Trump. He said he would build a wall. Do you remember all of that? Build a wall between Mexico and America to stop people from Latin America coming into the United States. Have you seen that wall? No. All these easy, off-the-shelf, rather demagogic, facile responses doesn't work. The basic problem, I think, is that everybody in Africa now has got what we call an iPhone. That's mine. And
okay,
every
Denis,
day
unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but we appreciate so much your thoughts, obviously, on migration and what's happening at the German border. Thank you for joining us so much on the NewsHour.